Hello YouTube. Hope you guys enjoyed the holidays. I'm back and it's time to get back into this cheeseburger course. Because this course is nearing completion, I'm going to dedicate the next couple of weeks to uploading a handful of lessons for this course. Expect to see a new cheeseburger lesson every Monday for the next 4 weeks or so. In this lesson, I'm going to finalize the shading for this bun. At the conclusion of the last lesson, I had a list of changes that I wanted to get done before moving on. I wanted to reduce the roughness of the singe, paint the core of the crumbs to be a lot more desaturated so that it blends into the more saturated outskirts, paint the edges of the shell to be brighter and the top of it to be darker, and lastly, I wanted to use some of my flakes from Substance Painter to create normal and displacement detail in Zbrush. After inspecting the results a lot more, I've added a few more changes to the list. I'm going to run down the list and get everything done. After that, I will do a final analysis to determine what additional fixes are needed. But ultimately, at the end of this lesson, we should have a mostly finished top bun. I went ahead and did the first 2 tasks before starting the recording. So in the last lesson, when I went to Zbrush to run a clay polish on the shell, if you remember, I exported a normal and displacement map for the shell, but I forgot to export the newly modified shell mesh to Maya. So I went ahead and did that, brought it into Maya to replace the old geometry, set up its displacement settings, and applied the top bun material to it. The second change was related to the SSS scale value of the outer shell. In the last lesson, I went into Substance Painter and created an SSS scale map for the top bun. I set the outer shell and singe SSS scale to 0.1 so that the outer shell and singe would have less of a subsurface effect. I decided to increase the value to 0.3 in Substance Painter, so the update has been exported and the new render should reflect the increase in SSS scale for the shell and the singe. With those 2 changes out of the way, I'm going to move on to the rest of the items on this list. One thing that I mentioned in the last lesson was how I feel like the singe is looking too specky, right? It's looking too glossy, but that also extends to the shell, right? I think the shell, after looking at it for a while, I do think that the shell also looks a little too specky, too glossy. But before I go to Substance Painter and modify my roughness map to make it more rougher and less glossier, I want to try something that I think is going to help, and that is taking charge of the specular color. See, right now, the specular color, let me map my bun, or actually I already have it mapped, but the specular color is pure white. And I think that it should be influenced in some way by the base color map. So I'm going to pipe in a variation of my base color map into specular to see what it does to the specular look. And after that, I'll decide whether or not it's a good idea to go and modify roughness. Right? This might resolve the issue I'm seeing and mute this super glossy look. The problem might be that it's just white. It's like a pure white color. So if it's inheriting color data from the color map, it might mute it in a way that makes it look acceptable. So I'm going to get started with that. This is my base color map. And I'm going to hit tab to pipe in an AI color correct node. And I'm going to pipe the color into the input. And what I'm going to do here is, I don't want this pure color. I do want some type of desaturation of this, right? Because I just want a hint of these colors in specular. So I'm going to halve the saturation. So I'm piping it in here, halving the saturation, and then taking the color and piping it into specular color. All right, so now I'm going to do some renders and I'll come back and compare the results of this to what I already have. All right, so I stopped the render immediately because I realized that I'm going to need to do a little bit more because it completely drowns out all the specularity. So this is what it was. This is the glossiness of the specular highlights that I'm having with my white specular color. And this is with the base color pumped in. I don't think I desaturated enough, so I'm going to go back and really try to get some more muted colors. I don't want it to be completely drowned out like that. I might even need to increase the exposure a little bit, but that might be what I should be doing, because saturation is completely stripping out all the colors, so I don't want to go too low. So I'm going to go 0.25, and then I'm going to add a slight exposure of 0.1. So saturation is down 75%, and I'm adding a slight exposure of 0.1. The results are still a little too drowned out. It's making its way back in, but it looks like I'm really going to need to alter that map a little bit more, or probably come up with my own map. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to come up with a unique specular map. So I'm going to continue making these modifications here. Let me just crank down the saturation to a 0.1 and see what's going to happen. There are some dark values in here. So I am going to go with 0.2. This is really desaturated almost completely. So, but let me see what results this gives us. I want to just get back to a point where at least I'm getting it as intensely as I had it previously, and then I will start working my way up slowly. All right, so what I come to realize based off of these results, because it's even still more muted, I'm counting on the wrong value to preserve the glossiness. I kind of suspected that I was heading in the wrong direction. I don't want to lose the color. The color is supposed to, I want the glossiness to inherit the color. So I don't completely want to desaturate it like this. So I'm going to bring back my saturation to about the halfway point. And what I really should be looking to do is increasing the exposure so that these values are now becoming higher, right? I don't want to keep the result that I have while I'm desaturating. Then I'm starting to get a black and white map, and it's telling me exactly why the glossiness is disappearing, because in the black areas, it's pretty much you're getting rid of the glossiness or the specularity, and I don't want that. So really what should be happening is that this exposure value is what I should be counting on. So I'm going to set it to 0.5, or actually let me go with a large value of 1, right? And so like a really large value to keep the values up there. And to be honest, I think I will even bring in back more of my color. So I'll go 0.75 so that I'm only reducing the color by 25%. And actually, let me push a little bit farther. So I'll go with like a 2. Maybe that's too much. Let me go 1.5. And I'll come back with the results of this. So I've brought my color back in, 75% color, and exposure has been cranked up to 1.5 so that I start losing the black values so that I can get specularity in a majority of the areas. And then I'll move on to modulating from there. So I'm going to render, and I'll be back with the results. Okay, so now I'm starting to get what I wanted. But this is with an additional modification I made. So when I left off, I had a exposure of 1.5. So I had to double that. That's how much it took to start making the specular come back. So I'm at 3. At 1.5, this is what things look like. This was 1.5. So it's still muted. It's not, wasn't really standing out. This is the original with pure white spec. This is at 1.5 exposure and 75% of the color. And what you're seeing right now is at 3, exposure of 3. So you see some of the color, the texture color is now impacting the specularity significantly. So I'm going to come back with a rendering of all these views so I can make a comparison and see what things look like. All right, so here are the end results, and I really like it. This is with the pure white alpha. I'm going to zoom in so you can take a look at how much of the whiteness we're losing, but still preserving our specularity. This is with our exposure of 3 and 75% color. So this is the end result. It's also definitely muting out the specularity on the singe, which is not looking too bad. It's definitely taking all of it out though, because this is a dark color. So no matter, I'd have to increase exposure more to get it to start popping up over here. But I have a very cool idea I'm going to execute very shortly. I'll show you what I have planned. This is the side view, and this is with the colored specular of 3 exposure and 75% of the color impacting specular color. And this is the back side. So I like what it's doing. It's making the piece look more cohesive. This white highlight was making it look not so cool. So I think this is a good starting point. And it also means that I don't have to go and make the big alterations that I had planned to go make on the roughness map. But there is something I'm going to do with roughness. Let's take a look at my reference. There's something in here that I want to cheat into my render. It is more than likely a result of how much the image is sharpened. but I really like it. It's this dotted high exposure glossiness, right? So it's not glossiness that spans across larger areas like this. There's just these individual dots in there that are almost pure white. And once again, I know it's a result of sharpening the image, but I want to cheat it into my render. And I have a plan to do it, but it's going to be a separate map. And I'm going to show you how I'm testing it right now with a noise map in Maya. So what I've done is I went into my hypershade, right? And I'm starting to set up the network. But what I did was I loaded in a noise, right? So this is a noise, a default noise. This is what it looks like. And then I crank down the ratio so that I get a pure white, black and white map. And I think then I came down here and reduced the frequency. I increased the frequency so I have smaller, more tiling. And then I came and reduced the density so that I can get more black inside the background, because I want spot, like white, pure white spots. And then I think I increased the spottiness, but I reduced the density like this. And I think I did something else to push. Yeah, I think I brought threshold all the way down to 0 so that I get pure white. And it looks like I also modified depth mask. I don't think that made that much of a difference, but I did modify frequency ratio to 1. But the objective again was to come up with a black and white map like this. What I'm going to do with this noise is I'm going to layer it onto the roughness map, and then I'm going to layer it onto the version of the base color map that is being piped into the specular color, because I want to get these like high value white spots in there. In order to do that, I need a layer texture. So I loaded in a layer texture here, and it has 2 inputs. And the first input is this black and white noise. And in this instance, the second input is my roughness map. So I pump that into color, and I end up with this combined map of this super spotty map here. It should be showing over there. Yeah, this is my roughness map from Substance. And this is my super spotty map. It shouldn't be showing this. It should be showing a pure black and white map. But when it goes in here, then it turns into this. And this is what I'm now going to pump into my roughness, specular roughness. So I have to pick one of the channels to do this. I only want one of these channels. So it goes in there. Let me try this again. There. And then I'm going to do something similar for this node. So I'm going to take a layer texture. And in the first slot, I'm going to pump this black and white map. Okay, so there it is, pure black and white. And then in this, the second slot, I'm going to create a second slot by just clicking here. And I'm going to pump in this altered version of my base color map with the color value desaturated by 25% and the exposure set to 3. I'm going to put that here in the second slot. Let me make sure I have that in the second slot. And then these two are going to need to mix. And this is a very important thing I also forgot to mention. I do have to change the blend mode. So what I'm basically trying to do is add this onto this result, which is what I did here. Right, so the blend mode is add. So I have to come over here and set the blend mode to add. All right, so I'm going to see what impact it has on the render. But first I do need to pipe this into specular color. So I'm going to take the color value and pipe it into specular color. Now I have this spotted map impacting roughness and impacting specular color being added onto them. And if it works, then I will go into Substance Painter and actually paint this spotty map. I don't want this randomized result from Maya's noise function. I want to actually put it in strategic areas, like sort of around these edges and like just really specific areas, so that when it's rotating, you're going to see like these singular areas really highlighted and hot. All right, so let's see the end result. So I'm going to go to my renderer and see how this is impacting it. All right, so I'll come back with the results. All right, so here are the end results of the test. I seem to have gotten something wrong in the logic, but let me show you what I ended up with. So this was without this little network, this spotty network, and where we last left off, this is the end result I got. So you see there are areas where the spots are impacting the specular color and the roughness map, but it's doing it incorrectly, right? You can see it all over. It's just making it darker, and that is because I had the logic wrong. So I had to do a few things. You see, with the roughness map, I seem to have confused myself. In order to make something glossier, you want a black value. So this noise map, right? And this is, by the way, this is the icon you have to click to show the preview of the node. So this map is black and white. Basically, what I was telling it is that the areas where there's white, make it rougher, and that is wrong. Right? I need the areas that are showcasing white here to actually be black. So this map needed to be reversed. So I inverted it with a reverse node, right? So now these spotty areas, these black areas are going to have the highest amount of gloss, right? But now that I've created a map like this, the way it needs to be combined with the roughness is not through an add blending mode. It's through multiply, because all the areas that are white, I don't want them to impact the roughness map. I want my roughness map as is, like this, to come through. And the only things that I want on this roughness map to be impacted are the areas that are black here. So that means I would have to come over here and set the blend mode to multiply. So when I look at this now I have my roughness map underneath there. And then the super black areas are coming from this reverse node. And that means they are going to be the glossiest. The other one is fine. It's supposed to be a add, and it takes the map, the noise map, as a raw value, right? So when I come back with the spotty map that I paint from Substance Painter, it is going to have to be piped into these, right? It's going to replace this noise map. But this is the end result right here. And now it's doing what I wanted to do. So the spotty areas, this is it without the network. And you see that now those areas that I've created as spots are really high, like really hot, or almost white, pure white. And this is the kind of effect I'm going to expect. Obviously, my spotty areas won't be this large, so they will be significantly smaller when I go paint them in Substance Painter. So I just wanted to show you guys what the effect is going to be trying to simulate. And yeah, this is the wrong one. This is with the right network. All right, so from here, I'm going to jump into Substance Painter because the next couple of changes on the list require me to go back to Substance, right? So this was just a little test, and I'm going to come back with the maps that I need from my list, all the changes that I wanted to make, and then I'll process them all together. All right, so we're here in Substance Painter. And the first thing I'm going to start off with is that roughness cheat map. So I'm going to create a fill layer, and I'm going to group it, call it roughness cheat. And the core map is going to be black with white spots. So I'm going to hit Alt to activate only color. And then I'm going to come over here and set it to a pure black. And another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I do a geometry mask to isolate all the work I'm about to do to the shell and the singe. Actually, no, what I will do is make sure that I do that geometry mask over here, because this map should not impact the crumbs at all. And with whichever layer texture is being used in, I need to make sure there's a color on the crumbs that makes it not impact the crumbs in any way. So I'm just going to duplicate this and make sure that the first one is for the crumbs. Do a geometry mask and just make sure that I hit Alt to activate it on the crumbs. And this one will be for the shell and the singe. And I'll do a geometry mask and deactivate the crumbs. I'm going to add another fill layer, and this fill layer is going to be our pure white. So I'm going to alt click, make sure it's a pure white. It's going to be even whiter than the white we were experimenting with in Maya with the noise. I'm going to right click, add a black mask so that I can remove it, add a paint layer. And then I'm going to turn on my wireframe so I can see what I'm doing. Actually, I might want to leave wireframe off. It's a little invasive. What I will do instead, visually invasive, I just want to be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to turn on, go to material mode. And I wanted to put this spotty information in manually, and I think I'm going to stick with that. But I'll stick with a softer brush so that I have a nice transition between these manual spots I'm going to put in. And they're going to be significantly small, just really like this. Yes, things like that. And really, I should utilize one of these brushes because one of these brushes definitely will do a good job with that. Dots erase would do a great job, and so will regular dots. Only thing I have to be careful about is I suppose the spacing. If I increase the spacing, I should be able to, okay, that's what it's gonna do. Yeah, that's pretty large. So I'm going to continually change the size of the brush as I go around to create these hot spots. And yeah, I do want some of them on the crust. They're getting a little harder to see, so I will be turning off this material shortly. I'm going to hold down shift also and move the light away. Hold down shift and use my left mouse button to make the HDRI rotate so I can see what I'm doing better. Let me try dot erase too and see what that does. And that's too much. I would have to widen the spacing here too. Yeah, that's aggressive. So I'll try to minimize how much of it I do with these brushes. Yeah, I think this is going to be good. I'm for sure gonna have to come back around and do some manual modifications because that's a lot. All right, so I'm gonna go back to my base color and take a look at it. Yeah, that's a lot. So I might not be going with that many, or maybe I don't have enough. I think I'll err on the side of not having enough and go in there and start putting in some more. Okay, that's my roughness cheat map. If I need to, I'll come back and make some additional changes, but I think this will give me what I want. And I won't end up with too much of a specky singe, sort of spotty dots that highlight very small areas. So, well, I think this will work. Okay, so that's my roughness cheat map. I don't have to, but to be safe, I'm going to also include, use the same mask here. I can actually copy geometry mask and just do paste geometry mask so that it's only impacting everything, all the dots I'm putting in only go onto the singe and the shell. So the next change I'm going to make is related to the crumbs. One of the changes that was planned from the last lesson was to have this core not just be like a pure yellow value. I wanted some gradation from desaturation to more saturated outskirts. Let me look for an ideal place to put it. Actually, I think it should be fine just sitting on top here, on this top layer. So I'm going to add a fill layer, pick a value for it. I will pick this value, and then I will desaturate it significantly here. And so probably should preserve the same value and just desaturate it. Not sure, I'll go a little bit higher to get a higher value. Okay, that should be it. Okay, that's an interesting color. And then I'm going to add a black mask, add a paint layer, and make sure I call this crumbs desaturated core. I'll come over here. I'll grab my cement brush because I want a big shape for this. Okay, so I'm going to come here and start to introduce that color of the core. Not too much on the outskirts. Just okay. I'm gonna zoom out, take a look at it. Maybe too much. I'm going to subtract with a dots erase brush. Hit X to go in the black subtraction so that it's more interesting shapes. Okay, I'm gonna go X, see if I can end up with even more visual interest with this core. Yeah, that should be a lot better. But I will also take my smooth normals and make sure that I'm doing a fair amount of blending out. Yes, I'll take it. We'll see what this does, and then if I need to come back and do more work to modify it, I will. But this is a good result so far. I think I'll take this. All right, another change that I want to make that didn't quite make it to the list, but I think I saw it recently, was that when you go to the back, the singe isn't bleeding into the crust as much as it should. I think that it is, but it's just because it's angled down. I don't have enough of this darkness that makes it visible in the back. So I'm going to go to my singe and I'm going to find these colors. Let me see which one I need the most. It's not that one. It's that one right there. And I'm going to grab my cement brush because it's apparently what I use to do this. And I'm going to get some more of this singe color. Okay, and then there's a darker core, which this was done with dirt 2. So I'll go to dirt 2. All right, then the last one, which is the darkest one, I do also want to get some of that in there. So I'll go to cement. I think I use cement for that too. And all right, I think that should be fine. That should allow this singe to show a good amount from the back in the areas where it was weaker. So it looks like I forgot to hit record, but I'm going to go over what I've decided to do with the changes to the color. So initially in the last lesson, I did talk about how I wanted to make alterations to this shell color so that I have brighter edges. And initially it was going to be a replacement. If you remember, I showed reference for buns that had this type of discoloration, brighter at the edges, darker at the top. And I said I was going to modify my shell to look like that. But what I've decided to do is offer that as an option. So I'm not going to replace what I have because I like what I have and I want to be able to compare it. And in addition to that, I'm also planning on creating another option that better resembles the hue in my main reference. So in my main reference, I have a more yellowish hue. So that's what I just did right now, but it looks like I didn't record. So I'm going to explain what I just did. I duplicated my main base color, and this is going to be option 2. So this is going to be the option that is closer to the main reference. And what I did was I went and deleted all instances of shading that represent the crumbs because I want the crumbs to be the same as the original. So to pull the color data from the crumbs from the original. But for every single color value here that is impacting the shell, I went in there and sampled colors from my crystallized image. If you remember, in 2 lessons ago, I created a crystallized image of my main reference so that I could use it as a palette to sample values from. And I went through with all these fill layers. You will notice that now they all have this yellowish hue right there. And I just selected the fill layer and sampled off-screen colors of my main references bun. So that's why you see it with a more yellowish core. So these are all the layers that impact the shell. And then one issue I was running into was that at the lowest level, right here, I have my multicolor spray from Zbrush. If you remember, we did this at the beginning of the paint session, is that I went to Zbrush and I created this multicolor map. And this is what the multicolor map looks like. Now, this multicolor map, I remember painting also crumb information on it. So, but because I do want to use it, keep it as the base map for the shell, I found a way to isolate the crumb information by simply just creating a mask, a geometry mask. So if I click on this geometry mask, I just excluded the crumbs from it so that it excludes any crumb information from this new folder that is going to represent the option 2 color for the shell. So with this, it has a more reddened color. And the issue that presented is that now it has this really red color underneath the yellowish hue that better matches the main reference. And I wanted to alter that. So I used a color balance node. So I just right click, added filter, and then I went into the filter and selected color balance from the list. So it's right there, color balance. And what I did is I moved, these are all levels. So these were all here. It was like this for both highlights, midtones, and shadows. And all I did was I extracted the red and then I pushed myself to the yellow spectrum so that I have something that's more yellower. It's more visible here. So if you look here in the shadows, it should be, well, let me turn it on. So I pushed myself into the yellow spectrum. You see it heading into the more yellow spectrum, and I extracted the red. So I went ahead and did that for all of this. And if I turn it off, you'll see the original that's more reddened, and this one has a more yellowish color. So this I felt like will serve as a better base for this new yellowish hue we're going for. So anyway, that's what I did. Just take these highlights, midtones, and shadows, push out the red, push it more to the cyan, and then push into the yellow, which takes away the blues that are in there, which I'm sure there were some blues in there. So turning this all back on, I now have option 2 for my shell that is closer to my main reference. And when I'm exporting it, I'll make sure that base color option 1, which is what I've spent the past 2 lessons painting, is responsible for the crumb information. I want to keep that. So in order to export option 2, I do need to have base color 1 on so that I can get my crumb color. All right, so for my third option, this will be a good opportunity for you to see how I did this one. So the third option is the one where I want the brighter edges and the darker top. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this original base layer again, and I'm going to call this option 3. I'm going to put it right up here. Okay, and just like I did with option 2, I'm going to exclude the crumbs from it because I don't want anything I'm about to do to impact the crumbs. We're going to pull the crumb data from base color 1. And for now, I'm going to turn off base color 1 so that I can focus. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this option 3 and I'm going to eliminate all the nodes that were intended to shade the crumb because you don't need it. So I'm going to go delete this one, my aocentric shading, delete the crumbs. For my large scale base here, I have a crumb coloring, so I'll remove that by deleting that too. And I think that should be it. I think everything else is related to the shell. And yeah, this is the singe, and that's all shell information. And even if it was crumb information, it wouldn't show because of this mask. But just to make sure the file size isn't ballooning to these huge sizes, I want to make sure I delete layers I don't need. This file is already a gig. It's good that it's not going to expand any further because we're closer to the end. All right, so now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add a fill layer that is going to allow me to do my brightening of the edges first. So I'm going to add a fill layer here, and it should be under the singe. And I'm going to sample a brighter hue from one of these images. I'll probably take from this one, see how well it works. And I'm gonna go in here, first hit Alt to just isolate the color, because I only want to use color here. And I'll sample this fairly bright image. And then I'm gonna add a black mask, add a paint layer to that. Make sure I call this brighter edges. And I'm going to come and grab my cement brush, which I'm going to grab cement too because it looks like it has a lot more contrast in it. And I'm going to start coming in here and introducing this color. Might find that it's just a little too bright. I'm gonna go with like big shapes initially. And it shouldn't be even, so I'll be careful about how I do this. And I definitely picked the wrong color, so I'll be altering that shortly. Okay, I want to get my normal soft, smooth normals brush and start blending. Should be. Actually, that's not going to do the job. I want to make sure I set it to black and then start doing manual blending. Make sure it transitions well all around. In some areas, I want the transition to be harsh though. I don't just want all even, nice gradation. I just want some varied color information. I'll look at it from a distance, make sure I'm getting some good results. I'll hit X, switch back, and I'll see if I can use another one of these brushes to get some different types of shapes. Let me try the cotton. Variants too. I'm also going to do the blending. Yeah, that's a lot of discoloration. Blend a lot more. Let me pick a smooth brush so I get better blending. I'm going to go now and start altering the color. So what I should have done really was pick this initially and then work on altering it. I'm going to move into a different hue here. Yep, that looks pretty good. That looks like it's working. But I should continue moving more into the yellow spectrum. Yeah, right there. It's really good. Yeah. My attention should be focused on blending this. But before I continue, I'm going to move on to just getting in the darker top. So I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to add a black mask to lose everything that's on it. And as a matter of fact, I should probably, let me just clear the mask. I'm going to clear the mask, or just make it a white mask so it shows the color. And then I'm going to hide it and sample one of these dark colors in here. That. Okay. And turn it back on and add a black mask so it goes away. Let me make sure there's this like white spot. I wonder where that's coming from. Okay, this is information that belongs in the crumb, and it seems to have bled onto this layer, so I'm going to delete it. And if it's here, that means it's also, and I don't want it there, so I'm going to come over here, go to my paint layer, make sure I have it set to black, and lose that information. It should only be at on the core. I don't know how I made it all the way back here. And to be sure that I've gotten rid of it, I'm going to right click here. I'm going to click over here and go to mask and make sure there's nothing on the shell and it's all on the core. Okay, that's fine. Go back to base color and head to my darker top. And definitely want to break it up a little bit more, or actually just look to put another. Yeah, actually I would want to break it up a lot more. So I'm going to grab my dots erased. I'm going to go into activate black, and then I'll use it to break up the edges a lot more, so I still get some degree of spotting. Okay. But it does look like I might need to play with this color, go a little into the darker spectrum. Yeah, like that. And I think I might want to add another tier, call this the dark top. And I'm going to duplicate this and call it darkest top. I'm going to pick a significantly darker down here. Yeah. And then I'll actually just add another black mask to get rid of it completely and use paint to introduce it in with smooth. Or actually I'll use one of my, no, I think I'll use smooth normals and introduce it in at the uppermost, the top area.
And that should suffice. That looks good. When I look at, yeah, that's still evident down there. And just like I did with the other one, I'm going to use dots erase to break this up a little bit more so that the underlying shaders show through. And I also want to do another tier of brightening. So another gradation of brightening. I'll duplicate this, add a white mask first. Pick this color to be a lot brighter, and then add a black mask, and then add a paint layer, and use the cement to introduce it here. Yeah, just really gingerly. This creates another tier of gradation. All right, so that's it. This is my discolored bun, darker at the top, lighter at the edges. And this is my option 3. And just like this second one, this will need to be on when it's time to export it. So that's it for the paint fixes I want to make. Now it's time to export all these changes to Maya. So I'm going to come back with the base color exported and assemble all this stuff in Maya, take a look at these options, and also take a look at how well this roughness cheat map is working. By the way, I've already done this a few times, but I just want to point out that how I'm doing this with all these maps is just going File. So if I was going to export option 3, I just go File, Export Textures, and I'll make sure that only color is checked. I only care about the base color, and I'll put it into a separate folder, and then I'll make modifications to the name and then dump it in my main folder. So that's what I'm going to do with all this stuff, including this roughness cheat map. Before I get into Maya and start assembling my shading networks, I want to talk about 1 pixel by 1 pixel UDIM tiles. So for this glossy hotspot map, that's what I'm calling this this dotted map that I'm going to overlay onto my specular color and roughness map. I'm calling it the glossy hotspots. So the first two have information that's useful because they're for the shell and the singe. The third doesn't have particularly useful information. It doesn't have anything, as a matter of fact. It's just a black map because it's for the crumbs. So instead of exporting a fairly large tile size, well, I did start by exporting it with whatever substance allowed. So substance allows me to export 1 resolution for all the UDIMs at once. So I chose 4K for this, so I have high fidelity maps. But for this last one, I'm not going to use it at 4K. So I took it into Photoshop and turned it into a 1 pixel by 1 pixel map, right? So I just right click and went into Photoshop and changed the image size, because there's no need for something that's just a pure black map with no color information on it or no data on it to be any bigger than 1 pixel by 1 pixel. Maya should be able to read it in a lot faster. So we only have the stuff that has information on it. These are my 3 color maps, the 3 options. I've named them 1, 2, and 3, and I'm going to pipe them into a switch node so that I can toggle between all 3 of them in Maya. All right, let's go into Maya and let me start assembling these node networks. All right, so I went ahead and before I got started, I went and flushed out all the textures. So again, that's Arnold flush caches textures, just so it can release the textures so I could replace the textures in the product file with the textures baked to the individual folders. So now I'm going to put that spotty map here. It's going to replace this noise map. So I'm going to hit Tab, look for a file node, and file, top bun glossy hot spots. That's what I'm calling it. All right, so I'm going to load it in. It's right there, top bun glossy hotspots. I'll go OK. I'll set it to UDIM. I'll set quadratic off so it doesn't pare down my detail. And because this is a black and white map, I'm going to process it as a raw, and then I'm going to turn on alpha as luminance. All right, and this is now going to replace this noise map. So the first version of it is going to go into inputs here. And then the next version of it is going to go into the other layered texture for the specular color. So that's going to also go here. All right, so that means we don't need this noise anymore. I'll just put it on the side for now. And then for my base color, this is my base color map. I have to be particularly careful here. Actually, no, it's fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of those switch nodes, right? And it looks like base color is being piped into 3 different locations, so I have to be mindful of that. So I'm going to use basically this AI switch node. All right, so I'm going to create one of them. I'm going to get tab AI switch. It's just going to sit over here. I can delete this group node. And then I'm going to grab this texture, and I think I should be able to do an edit, duplicate. Actually, I'm not going to do a duplicate shaded network. I don't want it to duplicate the entire shading network, so I won't do that. I'll just bring the rest of them in. I'll create 2 more file nodes. And I'll make sure to change this one to say base color 1, because this is now going to hold the first base color. This one will hold base color 2, and this one will hold base color 3. And I'm going to port in now my new base color. I should be able to just type 1 here and hit enter, and it should find the 3 files. And because the rest of them are also in there, I could just copy and paste these down here. So I'm going to go like that. Switch it to UDIM. Found the 3 files. These are color maps, so I do want them to be sRGB. I'm going to turn off filtering. I don't want any filtering, so I'll turn off filtering again. And this one, I made a mistake. I have to make sure it's referencing 2. Okay, it said it didn't find that. Let me check on the file system to make sure I have the naming convention right. Okay, I'll just load it. So, because I know it's in here. Top bun base color 2, that. Open. Okay, now I found it. And I'll just load the third one in too. Top bun base color 3. Okay, and this one is also going to be UDIM, sRGB, filtering off, and that's our 3 options for the color map. So they are all going to be funneled into these inputs. I'll do input 1 so that I don't confuse myself. I know when I switch this node to 1, I'm looking at texture 1, 2, I'm looking at texture 2, and 3, I'm looking at texture 3. So these are all my texture maps, and I'm going to start piping the out color into first the base color, then it goes into this input here, this color correct node for the specular color, and then the last one goes into a color correct node that goes into our subsurface color and radius. That's something we did in the last lesson. So I'm going to pipe here into there. And this color correct node, as I mentioned, there are no changes on it. I don't think I made any changes. It's there so that we can modulate the subsurface information by playing with the color correct node, but right now it has no changes. So that's the 3 nodes. What I'm going to do now is see how it works. So if I was to hit this, it gives me a preview of which texture should be wired in. Right now, because it's set to 0, there's nothing in 0, so it shouldn't show nothing. But if I hit 1, I should have texture 1. Weirdly enough, it's not reflected. But if I switch to 2, it should show texture 2, and then 3 shows texture 3. So it is toggling between them. So it's doing the right thing. I just was hoping to see it over there, but I guess it's misbehaving right now. So that's it. These are the modifications to the node network to accommodate the 2 new options of the texture and to process our glossy hotspots. I'm going to do some renders. I want to make sure this is at 1, and I'll be back so we can make an analysis. This is pretty much, we're close to finishing this thing, and I just want to see what all these changes produce. And after this, we have one more thing to do, which is go into Zbrush and use flake data from Substance Painter to create detail on the displacement and normal maps. And that should wrap up the bun. All right, so I'll be back with the renders. All right, so I got a couple of renders done. First thing I'm going to look at is the glossy hotspots. This is the old shell without the glossy hotspots. Actually, this is it. And this is with the glossy hotspots that I cheated in. So you can see them in there. What I might have done is underestimated how much of it I need, how many spots I needed. Because the way glossiness or roughness works, it depends on the angle that the item is with the light source. So you're only going to see this stuff in areas where it's at the right angle, where we have the most amount of a highlight. So I might need to increase the amount, right? But it seems to be working. It's right there. It's a really hot spot, pure, almost pure white. One of the first changes I want to do is go back and just add a little bit more of them. Now, the second thing is the core, the crumb core. It's working, but it's a little too bright. So I just need to reduce the opacity, right? But it's doing a nice gradation to the outskirts. These are the other angles with the glossy hotspots. They are almost negligible because there's not that much of a highlight. And in the places that there's a highlight, I didn't have enough spots there. So once again, that will be resolved. We'll go back and add some more spots. Now let's take a look at the other color options. So this is the more yellowish shell that matches the reference, and it's looking really good. It's really looking very much like the reference. I have the reference side by side. I'm really getting that feel, right? I almost nailed it, almost the exact same. So that's a good thing. It's good to have this option for anyone who ends up with this asset if they want to use it. I'll make sure to be consistent with the bottom 2. I might give it these 3 options or not. I might just go with the yellow. No, I think at the very least I need to give it a red option and this yellow option too. So we'll be doing both for the bottom bun. Rest of the views look great too. And the one that even turned out better than I thought is the lightening of the edges. This looks really good. It's a very interesting piece now. Looks really, really nice. So this is a third option for the bun. It helps it look really, really realistic. So these will be the 3 options. Another issue that I'm noticing is a stacking order issue. If you look at the original, you see that the shading is correct in the core. But if I look at the other options, I have a stacking order issue. So all that stuff I did where I'm counting on the bottommost option to shade the crumbs, I messed up because the stacking order of those crumbs and shells was important whilst I was shading. So I can't just eliminate the crumbs from these options. So that means that these options are going to have their own crumb layers. I'm just going to have to accept that, right? If I ever need to make some major changes to the crumbs, I'll have to copy and paste them to those folders. So that's another change I'm going to go back and do. And one more thing that I'm looking at that I think should change is I want to hike up the exposure for the AI correct node that controls the specular color just a little bit more. So that's something I'll come back and do. But those are the changes that I want to do. And whilst I'm doing them, I'm going to complete the last and final change, which is taking one of the flake maps to Zbrush, or some of the flake data to Zbrush, to create normal and displacement detail that I can bring back into Maya. So these are the last set of changes, and this should wrap up this lesson. All right, so we're back in Substance. I'm going to turn on my glossiness cheat map. I've called it a glossiness cheat now because that's what I'm trying to cheat. And just remember, glossiness is the opposite of roughness, but ultimately they are the same maps. All right, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to add these changes as a new layer. So I'm going to right click and go add black mask, and then so I can clear the data that was on before. And I'm going to add a paint layer. And now I'm going to count on my spray brushes, like things like my dots and my dirt, to really get a lot more information in there. Use dots, but I'm going to go through after and go over some of them to give them more intensity. And last thing I do want to do is I want to go in there, pick a hard brush, which has no opacity whatsoever, and use it to intensify some of these spots. So I'm going to duplicate this layer again, call this spots, intensify, add a black mask, add a paint layer, and then come in here, and then for some of these guys, just make them more aggressive. All right, so that seems to be enough. So this is our new glossy hotspots map. 2 tiers of changes added. And see how well I made some more abstract shapes, and then it's good to have some super intense areas, and so it'll be popping out in a very interesting way. And if I really wanted to intensify a majority of them, I could probably use filter. If I was to grab all of these and I group them, I should be able to add a filter and go with a levels. Actually, it wouldn't be a filter, it would be a levels. So if I right click and I say add levels, I should be able to might be moving the wrong dial. Yeah, I think that the levels would have to be on the individual layers. So I'm going to go to these newly ones I added. I'm going to right click, do a levels. Oh, it's not having the... All right, so after a few tries, I actually figured out what I was trying to do. It is a levels, and I'm in fact going to add it to the second tier of spots, or the more spots I added, but I was moving the wrong dial. So if I right click and I add a levels, I'm supposed to be moving this middle dial here, right? And if I move it back, it intensifies the spots, right? So I'll see how well this works. I should probably add one to the first one too, and paste effect. And yeah, that should really make them pop out. All right, so this is our new glossiness cheat map that's using 2 levels to cheat more hotter spots. All right, and the next thing I have to fix is what I did with these textures. So the first one, first I'm going to clear these geometry masks. So I'll go include all, and I'll start here. Make sure there's no more geometry masks in here, and just replicate the whatever order I had previously. So this large scale detail, which I appear to have deleted. I actually deleted that. I didn't realize that. Deleted important information for the shell. And it probably also needs to be modified if that is the case. So I'm going to duplicate this because I lost all the information for this. So I'll duplicate it and make sure it's here on the bottom. And so I have the crumb information, large scale crumb detail, and I'm going to duplicate it yet again. I don't think I did clear it out from here too. No, it's fine here, but it is missing its crumb information. So I'll duplicate the crumbs and move them in here. Make sure I have the same stacking order. The crumbs are on top, shells are at the bottom. All right, so now this has all its lost information. I probably need to come in here and make some changes. I'll take a look at it. Next thing I need to do is go grab the aocentric information for the crumbs. So I will duplicate this and dump it in there. And make sure it's underneath the shell, because this is about stacking order. I painted it in a certain way. Need to preserve that. And I will duplicate it yet again and go put it in the third option right there. Make sure it's at the bottom. And I think that's it. I don't think there's any more information from here, from our first option, that is related to the crumbs, or I might be wrong. I think there is this crumb desaturate. I'm going to get that into the other two. Well, actually, before I get it in there, let me make the one change I need to make on it, because I did mention that it needs to be less intense. So let me minimize these two options. Enable this one. And to intense, so I'm going to come over here, reduce the opacity down to 50. My 50 might be good. All right, so with that out of the way, I can duplicate it. And there is a smarter way to do things like this in Substance, with probably a pointer and stuff, but I'll probably research it for if I want to do something like this in the other lessons, and I'll come back and show how to do something like this. But the way I painted it, and in layers, and there's specific ways it needs to be stacked, I don't want to disrupt that, so I'm just going to go with this approach. And another thing that appears to be wrong is the color data for the second one. It looks like I altered crumb information that needed to stay the same. So I'm going to go find it. Well, it's more so singe information. Yeah, it was a sloppy attempt at creating them. I needed to really pay attention to some of the paint work I had done. Okay, so it's this multicolored base, and it's the changes I made for the multicolored base that I only wanted to affect the shell. So what I need to do is duplicate this, make sure that one of them is only impacting the shell and the singe, and that's the one that needs the color balance, and the other one doesn't need it. It's only impacting the crumbs. And so I can delete. That should have fixed the problem. So if I toggle, yeah, it just has a little bit of this yellow color information, which even that I should be more mindful of it. There's a lot of color extending down here. Let me find that layer, find out where that's coming from. Yep, it's right there. So secondary shell information, one of these. Yeah, just the first one. So I'll go ahead and also isolate this to the shell and the singe. I want it to come down into the crumbs. All right, and that should, actually might want to take it away from the singe. Should be fine now. If I hide this, it doesn't impact singe too much. Should be fine as is. Yeah, whatever minor impact it's making is negligible. And there's the same here. I'm going there. I think I saw something changing. Yeah, it might not be a big deal. Okay, so that's it with the majority of the changes. Well, pretty much that's it with all the changes that need to be made here. All these now have their own crumbs, so they can survive on their own, each of these groups. All right, so that's the glossiness fixed, and then these colors fixed. So I'm going to export them, and then I'm going to get started on getting these flakes out of here into Zbrush so we can go make a normal and displacement detail. It's time to try to get these flakes into Zbrush. Now, if all the flakes I needed were on just one mask, all I'd do is right click on the mask and go export master file. So that would give me a black and white file to play with in Zbrush. But in this instance, the mask, I might need a mask from more than one of these flakes. I might need to combine two together. And I don't want to deal with two maps in Zbrush. I just want it all welded into one. So if I go over here and click mask, it should allow me to see what masks, how the mask is looking. Okay, so for this one, this is one of the flakes. It's really intense, has a lot of data. If I go to this one and I look at it, the mask, okay, this is more partitioned into specific areas. And let me go look at what this one looks like. Go to mask. Okay, this one is looking pretty good. It looks like the one I might want to play with. But that's a lot of parts to inflate in Zbrush, so I'm a little wary about that. Maybe I should modify this slightly. Let me look at the last one. I'll come over here to the last one and look at the mask. Yeah, I'm probably not gonna mess around with this one. They're pretty large shapes. So really, I think it's this one that I want to play with. So let me look at it again. Yeah, I'm gonna play with this one. So what I'm going to do is create a new folder. First, I'll create a new fill layer, and then I'll group it. And I'm just gonna create a black and white mask. Flakes to Zbrush. All right, and I'm going to copy this mask and paste it here. Where's paste mask? Okay, first I need to add a black mask. Then I can paste mask into. Okay, so this is my masking information. I'm going to hide my base color, and then I'm going to add another fill layer that's going to act as a black base. So I'll alt click to only activate color, and then set this to pure black. Something I can also do here. Yeah, that's a lot of pieces to inflate. I'm afraid I might end up with a very lumpy result. Similar to the one I had that I had to go in and clay polish. So as great as this is, I want to minimize the intensity of these flakes. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to add another paint layer over here. I'm going to reduce flakes. Call it reduce flakes, and I'm going to get a spray brush. Actually, this is something I should probably do on a separate layer. So I'm going to actually just duplicate this black fill layer, put it up top, add a black mask to it so that it disappears, and then add a paint layer. Call this reduce flakes. Okay, this is a little bit more of a non-destructive approach. And then I'm going to make this dots brush fairly big, and I'm going to start painting like that. So what this is going to do is just going to tone down the flaking so that I don't take too much of an aggressive map into the Zbrush. I'm going to inspect the mask to see what, yeah, painted it quite a bit. And I'll just give it a similar application all the way around. Okay, so this is, again, intended to minimize the flakes underneath. And in order to intensify these black spots that I've introduced, so this is the original, this is with the reduction, and it looks like I might need more of a reduction than that. Or actually, I might not. I'll determine that when I add this this levels I'm about to add to overemphasize the intensity of the paintwork I just did. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to add a levels, and I want to see which direction I have to go into to make, yeah, okay, so it's the opposite direction here. So this intensifies the paintwork I just did to further mute out those values. So this, what I'm seeing is going to be, let me push it a little bit more. These are going to be the flakes. I'm going to be used to produce those flakes in Zbrush. I'm hoping it looks good. If it doesn't, just retreat. I might be drowning out too much. Okay, that should be fine. I'm going to export this as a texture map, and then I'll come back in Zbrush and show you how I'm going to use this map to create the lumps on the high subdivision layer of the shell. So I'll go File, Export Textures, and put it in a folder. Make sure I'm exporting a 4K map, and I just want the color pass because the color pass is what's holding this black and white data. And actually, another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to uncheck these two because I know this is the singe and this is the crumbs. These are the crumbs. Yeah, so only the UDIM tile one has the flakes, and that's the only thing I want. So I'm just gonna leave that one active. Created a folder called Flakes to Zbrush, and I'll just export. We're here in Zbrush, and this Zbrush file has gotten really, really large. It's about 7 gigs. So I'm going to do some management. The last time I came in here, I came to do the clay polish to take away that bare claw feel, and I ended up with 2 meshes. One of them was a clay polish on sub D4, and one of them was a clay polish on sub D3, which is what I ended up using. So since I'm not using this one, I'm just going to delete it because it's expensive asset. And I'm going to make these new modifications on a separate mesh. Actually, go on a lower subdivision level, duplicate this mesh, and rename it Top Bun with Flakes. Okay. This is the original before I did the clay polish. This is the clay polish one, and this is the one I'm going to be working on. I'm going to go all low to take all these, make sure all these meshes on the lower subdivision level. And this is the only one I want at the high subdivision level. And ultimately, instead of duplicating this mesh, I could have done the work on a layer, but it would work too. A layer would work too, and that's probably what I should have done. Let me look at what the layer stack looks like. Layers are really slow though. That's fine, it's no big deal. I'll just do it on this new mesh. I already duplicated it. So what I'm going to do is first import my flakes map. I'm going to import it into this alpha section. So there it is. I should probably pick a material that will allow me to see this better. Okay, so with it imported, I should be able to do under masking, should be able to mask by alpha. Yeah, and there it is. Yeah, so it masked by alpha. Yeah, and I probably will do this on a layer. It's easy to modulate the result if I put in too much information. So I'm going to add a layer, call it flakes. Or let me give it a better name, flakes bulge. All right, then what I'm noticing is that this is not a fully intense mask. No, I might be wrong. This might be full intensity. All right, there's really only one way to test. I'm going to go to deformation. And I'm going to do an inflate by maybe like 20. Yeah, it's a full mask. So at least it's working. So really, I want an inflate balloon, and I'm going to do maybe like 2. Okay, that is too much. Inflate balloon is a very intense effect too, though, so I might not want that one. I might just go with an inflate. Let me see what an inflate of 1 does. Yeah, that's not bad. And look at it. Yeah, that's not bad at all. It's a good amount of detail. And if I wanted to, I could always just come over here to the layers and just intensify the layer, maybe set it to 1.5. Yeah, and that would push the shapes, all right, which might be what I need to make it stand out. Remove the mask and see what let me pick a, yeah, that's interesting data. Let me go back to 1. I think this 1.5 is a bit too intense. Or I might be wrong. You typically want to push these things farther to really make them stand out in the map. Or sometimes they just will not pop out in the map. So I'm going to go, let me go like a 1.25. Okay, so this is it. These are the flakes. And I'm going to export this, a normal and displacement for this, and replace the first tile of my normal and displacement maps with whatever I get from this, and see how it's working in Maya. All right, so I'm gonna go to the multi-map exporter, and I've done an export previously, so I'm gonna use the same settings. Normal and displacement, I pushed out a.k.a. maps, and these are the settings I use. 0.5 mid value, wanted it in all the 3 channels, and 32-bit EXR, and that's that. Okay, so I'm going to push this out, and I'll come back in Maya with renders that showcase all the changes I've made. All right, so this is at least a visual on file that allows me to see and make a comparison initially of the normal map. So this is the exported shell with the flake detail, and this is without. I've stored without just so I can always retreat to it if this is not working too well. Okay, so now it's time to review. This is the oldest render I had before I made all the changes. So this is the one with the less dense glossy hotspots map, and with the crumb detail a little too intense. And the other options of this old one had the stacking order problem. So this little stacking order, right? But this is also the old yellow shell, and this is the old multicolored shell with the stacking order. Now I'm going to compare it to the new renders. So the new renders, this is the final result. This is with the flakes, with the more dense glossy map, with the crumb, the desaturated core of the crumb reduced to an opacity of 50. The other options have their stack order fixed. And most importantly, the normal and displacement map have the flake data from Substance Painter. So let me zoom in and show you what this thing looks like. It looks very busy, but it looks really interesting. So if I was to hide this, this is the old one. This is with all the new changes, right? You can see that the new hotspots map is really active. It's really making some of these areas really pop out. It's really working nicely. And the flake map is cool detail, but I feel like it's really cool from a distance, right? It's very interesting. It's a lot of information. But yeah, I feel like it works better from a distance. Actually, sometimes even up close, it looks pretty nice, right? I've seen a lot of burger buns like this, but this definitely doesn't match our reference, but it's definitely a cool look. So it's good to have it. If you take a look at some of the other options, so I'll look at option 2. This is what the new one looks like. This is what the old looks like. So that flake data, and also you see the stacking order issue fixed. And this is the last option. This is the new one, old. So the new one is definitely more interesting, and but I don't feel like I can make that decision now. I want to see how all this thing looks like with all the other elements of this burger, and then I'll decide what I want to do. So what I actually did, because I cannot finalize whether or not I want to go with a flake detail, because that's the only thing I'm contemplating on, is I went into Maya and I've given myself the option. Let me stop this render first. And just like I did with the texture, the color map, like the color maps, the 3 options are using a switch. So are the displacement and the normal. So the displacement now is also using a switch. This is the original displacement. This is the displacement with flakes. And I've done the same thing for the normal map. So the 2 options are available via switch. So I can, throughout the course of this lesson, be switching back and forth between 1 and 2 to toggle between both of them. And that I think is going to be great. I can't really finalize right now without seeing it with everything. But one thing I did do was render an option without the flake so I can compare them. So let's take a look at that. Option 1, this is what the glossy hotspots, the new dense glossy hotspots looks like without the flakes. And this is it with the flakes. All right. The great thing about it is that because the flakes were done on high subdivision level 7, they are not too much altering the planar feel that I achieved with that clay polish. So that's a great thing. But I do feel like that smoothness looks cool sometimes. That non-flaky smoothness looks cool. And also the flakes make the glossy and roughness maps behave more interestingly with so much granular detail in there. Let's take a look at the second option with the flakes. Make a comparison of the 2. So this is the second option with the flakes on the normal map and without. I think for now I'm just going to leave it on. So, and I'll make my decision further down the line. And another thing I probably should have shown is what it looks like from the side view. So with option 1, this is the original. This is with the flakes. This is without the flakes and the old, less interesting glossy map. So you see the flakes are in there protruding, and you can also see the silhouette is also impacted because when it goes away. All right, and the same for the back side too. The back side, this is with the flakes, without. So it definitely makes the roughness map more interesting. So for now, I'm going to stick with it. So I'm going to go to Maya, go into my shader, and make sure that in my switch for displacement, I have 2 selected. So 2 selects the one with flakes, and I will do the same for my normal map. 2. So that's going to be it for this top bun. I think it's time to end the work that has been done in this top bun. And as I mentioned before, I'll wait till I have the rest of the elements in here to start really making some final decisions. I'm going to set this to B and then set the original to A so we can scrub through. Actually, that's wrong. I'm supposed to be setting this to A. Okay. So I can scrub through, show the differences. The old one is on the left and the new one is on the right. Yeah. I think the flakes really do help, and I think from a distance they'll always do a good job. And even from up close, it looks really, really interesting. Very interesting detail. It just sometimes looks a little busy, right? A little too busy, but I'll wait to make judgment also when I see it under all my other HDRIs. Right now, we're just using the Brown Studio 8 HDRI. So I'm on 1. So I'm using the File Brown Studio 2. There's so many others. Reserve my final judgment for when I have had an analysis under all these different lighting systems. That's it for this lesson and for the top bun. In the next lesson, I'm going to focus my attention on the cucumbers. The complete shading of the cucumbers is going to be broken up into 2 lessons, because at the bottom of the cucumbers, there's a lot of sauce, and the sauce comes in the lesson after that. So I'll be doing them back to back, but I'll be focusing on the parts of the cucumber that are really important to nail. There's a translucent part over here that should allow the seeds to show. It should transition to the sauce really well. Like here, all this bottom here has the paint sauce that transitions well. I also have a unique roughness map that allows it to transition well and feel wet. And and the top needs to be, that translucent part needs to really work. So I'll be painting some maps that are going to be piped into transmission. And I also want to make sure that both of them look different, because as mentioned, one of them is an English cucumber and one of them is an American cucumber. So to nail them just as they appear in this reference. So see you in the next lesson, where I start work on the cucumbers. And one thing I forgot to mention is that I did not change the exposure, right? I was talking about changing the exposure of my AI color correct node that impacts the specular color. I was going to crank it up a little higher, but I left it at 3. It's fine. After the new glossy hotspots map came in, the glossiness is behaving as desired. No changes here.